Long before the rise of the Great Pyramids and the Golden Age of Pharaohs, the civilization of ancient Egypt formed around the life-giving waters of the Nile, and with it emerged a complex spiritual worldview centered on death, rebirth, and the journey of the soul beyond the grave. Among the earliest and most mysterious figures within this belief system was Anubis, known to the ancient Egyptians as Inpu or Anpu, a deity represented as a man with the head of a black jackal, or sometimes as a full jackal lying atop a shrine, and his presence in Egyptian culture stretches back more than 5,000 years to the very earliest dynasties, making him one of the oldest gods ever worshipped in Egypt, a guardian of the dead and master of the sacred rituals that protected souls in the afterlife. And historians believe that the choice of the jackal as his symbol came from a very real and unsettling observation. Wild jackals and desert dogs often roamed the edges of cemeteries and burial grounds. In ancient Egypt, digging into shallow graves and feeding on the dead, a sight that deeply disturbed the living. And so in a powerful act of spiritual symbolism, the Egyptians transformed this frightening creature into a divine protector, believing that by honoring the spirit of the jackal they could persuade it not to harm the dead but instead to guard them. And thus Anubis was born as a divine sentinel of tombs and cemeteries, a god who walked the boundaries between life and death, night and day, desert and civilization. Archaeological evidence shows that Anubis was already widely revered during the period known as the early dynastic period of Egypt, long before the pyramids were constructed, and his name appears on ancient seals, funerary inscriptions, and royal tombs, indicating that even the earliest kings of Egypt trusted Anubis to guard their remains, and over centuries his role grew into something far more complex than merely protecting graves, becoming the divine guide who escorted souls into the afterlife and oversaw the sacred art of mummification. The ancient Egyptians believed that the human soul consisted of multiple spiritual parts, including the Ka and the Ba, and that preserving the body after death was essential for these spiritual elements to survive, which is why mummification became one of the most sacred and carefully guarded rituals in Egyptian religion, a process that could take up to 70 days and involved the removal of internal organs, drying the body in natron salt, wrapping it in linen bandages, and placing protective amulets between the layers. And throughout this ritual, priests wore jackal masks to symbolize that they were acting under the authority of Anubis himself, guiding the transformation of the corpse into a sacred mummy capable of eternal life. One of the most famous roles attributed to Anubis appears in the Egyptian funerary texts collectively known as the Book of the Dead, a compilation of spells, prayers, and instructions meant to help the deceased navigate the dangers of the afterlife. And according to these texts, the soul of the dead would be led by Anubis into a divine hall where a profound judgment would occur, a moment called the weighing of the heart, where the heart of the deceased, believed to contain the record of a person's deeds, would be placed on one side of a sacred scale while the feather of Ma'at, representing truth and cosmic order, rested on the other side. And if the heart was lighter than the feather, the soul would be allowed to pass into eternal paradise. But if the heart was heavy with sin, it would be devoured by the terrifying creature known as Ammit, a monstrous hybrid with the head of a crocodile, the body of a lion, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus. And in this solemn ceremony, Anubis stood as the divine judge who carefully balanced the scales, ensuring that justice was done. Interestingly, although Anubis played this central role in the judgment of souls during Egypt's early history, his importance shifted over time as Egyptian mythology evolved, especially during the period when the cult of Osiris became dominant, and Osiris gradually assumed the position of supreme ruler of the underworld while Anubis transitioned into a loyal assistant and protector serving under Osiris. Yet even with this shift, Anubis never lost his deep association with burial rites and the safeguarding of tombs, and depictions of him continued to appear in countless tomb paintings, temple carvings, and funerary statues across thousands of years of Egyptian civilization. The color black used in Anubis's depiction also carried deep symbolism, as the Egyptians associated black not only with death but also with fertility and rebirth because of the dark fertile soil left behind by the annual flooding of the Nile, and thus the black jackal form of Anubis represented both the decay of death and the promise of new life beyond it, embodying the Egyptian belief that death was not an end but a transformation. Ancient temples dedicated to Anubis existed throughout Egypt, but one of the most significant centers of his worship was the city known in Greek as Sinopolis, literally meaning city of the dogs, where large numbers of jackals and sacred dogs were revered as living symbols of the god. And archaeological excavations in this region have uncovered vast underground catacombs filled with thousands of mummified dogs, offered as votive gifts to Anubis by devoted worshippers seeking protection for their loved ones in the afterlife. Despite the strong mythological elements surrounding Anubis, the historical reality of his worship is firmly supported by archaeological discoveries across Egypt, including funerary masks, statues, tomb paintings, and papyri dating from the Old Kingdom through the Ptolemaic period, demonstrating that belief in Anubis remained consistent for more than 3 millennia, making him one of the longest-lasting religious figures in human history. During the time of the Great Pyramid, builders, particularly under rulers like Khufu and his successors, elaborate tomb complexes were constructed to ensure the safe passage of the king into the afterlife, and inscriptions within these tombs frequently invoked Anubis as the guardian of the necropolis, the sacred city of the dead where royal pyramids and burial chambers were located, reinforcing the idea that even the most powerful rulers depended on his protection. Beyond religious symbolism, the myth of Anubis also reflects the practical realities of ancient Egyptian life, where death was a constant presence due to disease, accidents, and warfare, and elaborate burial practices served not only spiritual needs but also social and political ones, reinforcing the power of the priesthood and the legitimacy of the pharaoh's divine rule. As Egypt entered the later phases of its history and encountered foreign cultures, particularly during the Greek and Roman periods, the figure of Anubis began to merge with aspects of Greek mythology, leading to the creation of a hybrid deity known as Hermanubis, a combination of the Egyptian jackal god and the Greek messenger god Hermes, both of whom shared the role of guiding souls to the underworld, illustrating how ancient religions adapted and blended when civilizations interacted. Nevertheless, the core image of Anubis as the silent jackal guardian of tombs remained deeply embedded in Egyptian cultural identity, and his image continued to appear in funerary art even as political control of Egypt shifted between native dynasties, Persian rulers, and eventually the Roman Empire. Modern archaeology has played a crucial role in uncovering the real historical significance of Anubis, particularly through excavations of burial sites where statues of the god were placed at tomb entrances, sometimes depicted crouching alertly as if ready to leap upon intruders, symbolizing his role as a supernatural protector against grave robbers, a very real threat in ancient times. When tombs were often filled with gold, jewelry, and sacred artifacts meant to accompany the dead into eternity, one of the most famous artifacts connected with Anubis is the black jackal statue discovered within the tomb of Tutankhamun in the Valley of the Kings, where the statue rested atop a shrine guarding the burial chamber, its golden eyes and alert posture suggesting eternal vigilance over the boy king's remains. And this remarkable discovery by Howard Carter in 1922 provided powerful evidence of how seriously the Egyptians regarded the protective role of Anubis even in the late New Kingdom period. Through these historical records, religious texts, and archaeological findings, scholars today understand that Anubis was not merely a mythical creature invented for storytelling but a central figure in the religious psychology of ancient Egypt, embodying the human attempt to confront the mystery of death and ensure that the journey beyond it was safe and orderly. And his enduring legacy continues to influence modern culture through literature, films, video games, and historical studies, where the striking image of the jackal-headed god standing beside the scales of judgment remains one of the most recognizable symbols of ancient Egyptian civilization, reminding us that thousands of years ago people looked into the darkness of death and imagined a silent guardian waiting there, guiding the soul toward whatever lay beyond the final horizon of life.